much for the kind introduction. I often wonder what I did to end up in this space, and this opportunity to speak was a good way to go back and catalog sort of the moves I've made in the process. So it's going to be, part of it's personal biography, part of it will be an explanation of some of the work that I've been doing collaborating with Google's Advanced Technologies and Projects Lab on this new wearable proposition called Project Jacquard. Part of it will be discussing the work I do in the sustainability space. Now, I'm leaving the Batwing on all slides, and that's sort of hovering above me, reminding me not to swear and not to spill tea, because I tend to go off. So pardon that corporate branding component, but it's there for a reason. Don't swear, Paul. And I'm fortunate to get to talk a lot. I go on, but I get to go around and talk about the work that I do. I never get to talk about it in the hometown and with so many gals in the audience. So it's a little. I just did a keynote at Harvard Design Conference, and I was not nervous at all. But whoa, it's Rachel and it's Marky and Matt. And, oh shit. Okay, so let's see. That's me. Okay. Writ large, what do? I'm a fashion designer. And so coming into a conversation that is intended to sort of discuss cross-disciplinary or antidisciplinary practice, in my case professional practice, is a little uncomfortable because I'm a huge proponent of a very rigid set of disciplinary boundaries, largely because that's what I got. That's what I got to work with. I did a BFA at Washington University in St. Louis in fashion design. And then as a Fulbright Scholar in Milan, I got my MFA in fashion design. And so I define my value entirely along disciplinary lines, and it doesn't occur to me to actually have dialogue on antidisciplinary practice. After finishing graduate school, moved to New York and did a very traditional, about 16 years in the fashion industry. Big design houses, did that whole thing. And it wasn't, there was some professional progress that really helped shine a light on the fact that the fashion industry is a source of its own problems. It is, generally it's averages in somewhere in the top 5 industries in terms of scale globally, employing around 300 million people globally. The largest producer of pollution, agricultural pollution, and it's all for a crop we don't eat, cotton. And it is also the source of jobs for a lot of people globally, but it's also the source of exploitive low-wage jobs for a lot of people globally. And so I became sort of disillusioned with the industry over time and thought that the best way to recharge, to shed that cynical perspective was to go teach. And that's not how to shed a cynical perspective, it turns out. That the life of the mind in the university is actually, you're going to calcify that cynical perspective in ways that you've never even expected. And my disposition towards this sort of focus on cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary education really hit a wall there as well, because I was training fashion students, almost all of whom had been compelled to take to pursue other degrees as well, primarily, unfortunately, business and marketing degrees, because their parents were worried they weren't going to be successful and going to have to move home, and so they wanted them to be equipped to go out and have a real job in business. And so the other sad thing that I was confronting with the students is they were all exceptionally smart, all to the student, very good at getting grades, and also good about bitching and complaining. And they would be building their prototypes, sewing their samples in the fashion studio, complaining about, oh God, this is so hard, it's taking so long. I'm like, you realize you're making one, right? You're crafting essentially a prototype intended to communicate design intent to a factory eventually. The thing that you're bitching about, you're actually asking someone who's making very low wages to make 100,000 of, and you're not considering that in any of your design work. And there was this sort of myopic focus on what happens from the runway forward and nothing about what happened that preceded that. And I inquired to with the students, well, what's your take on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire that occurred very early days of the 20th century, where a garment factory in Manhattan, 6th floor, the women were being prevented from unionizing, and the owners of the factory had locked the doors to keep union rabble out. Fire started, the doors were locked from the outside, and over 100 women, mostly young immigrant women, died with their petticoats ablaze jumping out a window. And this was one of the pivotal formative incidences in the American labor movement, and the students were entirely unaware of it. And anyone approaching an industry and is willfully ignorant of the breadth of the industry's impact really needs to consider their motivation. And so I was done teaching. And right as I was having this conversation, I had a great call from this nice company out on the other coast that I'd never considered. I'd never thought about leaving New York. I was in the Midwest, and so I was bi-coastal, if we count the Mississippi. But the idea of going all the way out to California was just a no to me until they said, well, come do whatever you'd like. We like what you do, and we want you to do it here, and we'll continue to let you teach, and we'll continue to support it. And in fact, they paid for my flights back and forth to St. Louis. They just had something. There was a palpable quality about business based in San Francisco that was so distinct in its values alignment from any of the business I'd worked in New York. And I'd been at Calvin for 7 years, and DKNY, and Valentino when I was over in Italy. And there was just something different about this company. It didn't seem like other companies. And so I got out there, and indeed it wasn't. First of all, the weather's lovely. The people are lovelier. You get to drive a car. And you get to meet amazing people who aren't solely defined by a disciplinary alignment to one particular profession. You meet people who you can't ask the question, what do you do? Because you'll be stuck for a long time. Everyone's doing everything. It's this really exciting, vibrant community, and I quickly fell in love. And as soon as I landed at Levi's and started doing the work there, an opportunity arose for me to join something called the Aspen Institute, which is a think tank that focuses on ethical governance for government, business, and education. And what I had really seen when I was a teacher, when I was a professor at Wash U, was that the students weren't indifferent to other discipline. They were lacking of vocabulary to participate in other disciplinary discussions. And then they were getting forced to follow a disciplinary alignment that wasn't comfortable for them, business in this case, when what was really necessary was not dual degrees in business and design or business and art, but really opportunities to create platforms for shared value and shared vocabulary. And so at the Aspen Institute, what I started working on was a design methodology that was sought to address a whole systems approach to sustainable design that took into account both the design aspects and the business aspects. And going through it quite quickly, first was the creation of an applied design method that sought to address the damages or the harms of the industry at every point along the process, understanding that much of our activity in sustainability in the apparel industry is about cleaning up a mess that's already been made. It's about taking a practice and process that exists and trying to erase the harm or clean up some of the damage, never considering that if we were to realign our entire methodology not to create the mess in the first place, we might have better traction. We might have we might be more successful. Often sustainability in the apparel industry is recalibrate a single component. People coming at you with a proposition around an organic cotton t-shirt. Never mind there's zero transparency as to where that t-shirt was made. Organic cotton can still be picked by children. There are a whole bunch of other considerations that go into that, and organic cotton can still be dyed by the most toxic dyes, and the effluents from those dyes coming out of the factories could be entirely unmanaged. But there was no single silver bullet, but everyone was approaching it with an appetite for a one-word solution that was easily printed on a brown paper hang tag with a green leaf, suggesting that somehow by remediating a single harm that you were doing good. And that's not the case. That you must have intention behind all decisions. You must focus on a values-guided material sourcing strategy. You must a values-guided intention around allocation to create social value. You must let intention take you to a design solution that is engineered for low impact, and so on and so on, that there are all these different points of intersection. If you believe in the value of recycled cotton, are you designing a garment that is fundamentally recyclable? Have you designed out all synthetics from that garment so that it can go in as a pure input? Single fiber strategy is a very difficult thing to achieve, especially when you think about the toxicity of the chemistry that created the button on your shirt. Similarly, inside the collar of any cotton shirt, there's more than likely a piece of polyester interfacing that if you were to try to recycle that shirt, you would be injecting a petrochemical pollutant into a recycling system. And no one was really prepared to take on all of these challenges, but Levi's afforded me the space through this Aspen Institute fellowship to really recalibrate every single manufacturing and design practice to create this sort of holistically sustainable design system. My intention behind that wasn't to create product, which was simply a research through practice proof point, but was rather to create a modular practice that could then be taught. Because adjacent to that applied sustainable methodology, there's a hypothetical sustainable business model that takes into account considerations like slow merchandising and sustainably guided inventory management and a whole bunch of other somewhat dull and pedantic topics, but essential for a well-working system. But if you take the two systems, or the hypothetical model and the applied system, and put them next to each other, what you have are modular curricular components that become extractable and teachable. And the opportunity here was to take research through practice and turn it into an applied sustainability curricular feature that I then had the opportunity to take out and teach. I wasn't done teaching, I was just done teaching those kids. I still thought that there was value in knowledge sharing. The other dilemma that sustainability in the apparel industry often confronts is this presumption that it's going to, that it's sort of a wet, hippie hemp poncho of some sort, that it's going to be brown, or that it's going to, you know, a recent survey I saw said, would you rather shop for ethical fashion or be sexy? And I thought, I love that, because it's an entirely false choice. The continuum that has sexy on one side has modest on the other. And the continuum that has ethical fashion as one choice on the opposite side has unethical fashion. And no one's ever confronting you with that fact. It's never, would you rather buy ethical fashion or not? The question needs to be asked, would you like to buy ethical fashion or unethical fashion? Because if you're about to buy something and you can't find easily and readily the place where it was made, the location, not of the country, but of the factory itself, more than likely the person who made that's got something to hide. If you cannot easily determine that the thing you're about to buy is in fact ethical fashion, count on it being unethical fashion, and then think about your decision again. We didn't want to make clothes that were necessarily brown and hempy. We wanted to make crisp clothes, attractive clothes, things that people would want to wear. But we wanted to do it in a way that was holistically sustainable. And I'm going to quickly go through some of the boring little details that make this design system different. So what you see here is a gentleman wearing a pair of twill chinos, a cute little yellow field jacket, a gray sweatshirt, and a white woven shirt underneath. All materials presented on this page were cultivated through the Better Cotton Initiative, which is a cross-industry consortium that seeks to modify cotton cultivar, improving the conditions of the people who are growing cotton and the environmental conditions of the fields themselves. Now, it was developed as in pre-competitive collaboration between companies like Levi's, Nike, IKEA, World Wildlife Fund, Marks and Spencer's, other big cotton consumers around the world that represented about 10% of the total global cotton economy. But because of their scale, there was no way to start an initiative like this and deliver 100% value to every participant. So everyone was at this point in time committed to a stage 10% deployment of ethical cotton here. But this was a first attempt to say, can we do 100%? And can we do 100% in a versatile way? And so it was an experiment first in transparency of sourcing, but then saying, how can I as a designer modify my expectations to facilitate a pure 100% ethical cotton deployment. In this case, if you look at the white shirt, that's made from something called a 60s yarn, a very, very finely spun yarn. So it's 60s, 100% Better Cotton Initiative cotton. But then the sweatshirt that's being worn there is a 30s doubles, which actually takes that 60s single ply from the shirt, plies it twice, and then it's into a totally different form than the original intention, which is the poplin. And then both the jacket and the pant are made out of a 3-ply of that same yarn. 3 plies then form this great 60s 3-ply twill that's been made into a jacket and a pant. And so once you've confirmed, it's been very difficult to do this, but once you've confirmed the transparency to the farm level, exploit that and use that single material as versatilely as possible, and you can come up with a wholly rationalized fiber strategy, but also a certainty that no material that you're introducing here is conflict, that if you confirm that one field has no child or bonded labor, why go somewhere else for your t-shirt? If you know the field that's producing your shirt is good, why go someplace else for your pant? So it was this design exercise that really got into the weeds about how to break down some of the barriers of opacity with the industry and try to find value through smart design by injecting values and considerations of sustainability into decision-making where it hadn't really been deployed before. When I say, if you're going to value recycled, you must also value the design process that makes something recyclable. In this case, if you look at that button, it's made out of recycled cotton. The reason is because we wanted a garment that could be dropped into a cotton garnating system and be 100% pure as an input. But we also wanted to find a place to put the outputs of that system, and in this case, there was enough recycled content available to make these buttons. The other important thing about that button being cotton is that the entire assortment that you see here is garment dyeable, because as much as we know about the factory where any of our clothes are made, we imagine what the effluent might be like coming out of the button factory. We don't know where the hell that button factory is. We don't know where the thread's colored. We don't know what the factory conditions are like, where they're dyeing the zipper tape that's later put into the garment. So if you could bring all the potentially pollutive components of an industrial system into the one place, the actual manufacturing site where you do have visibility and influence, you are taking responsibility for your own impact and also eliminating the potential for negative impact outside of that factory. And so it's a lot of in-the-weeds stuff that isn't normally part of the design conversation, but any designer who wants to tackle the challenge of sustainability and really wants to sleep at night needs to understand that this is the cost of ethical fashion, is that you have to become aware of your impact and then do everything you can to address it. And it's a lot of homework, but I think it's worth it. Now, that was all well and good for the Dockers brand. The challenge for the Levi's brand when we transitioned this process into Levi's is people know what a pair of jeans is, right? They know exactly what it is, and how can you go through and rejigger every component, recalibrate every component of an industrial process when the output is one of the most familiar garments in the history of mankind. And it's not easy, but it's important. And so there's with the jean this gentleman's wearing right now, it in every way, the look and feel is an indigo rinsed Levi's 511 slim fit jean. But the name of the farmer was Don Cameron, right? He lives in the Central Valley. He invested in drip irrigation, a very expensive way of irrigating a field, but it uses the agricultural runoff from the cotton fields and tomato fields around him and redeploys it in a way that reduces the water impact by about 35% in his field. We then sent this very special, also he's a breeder of cotton, he's not just a farmer, and he happened to have bred the longest staple, meaning the longest length fiber cotton that's ever been cultivated. And it was a breed of Sepima that was cultivated so it would be very soft. It turns out it also has about twice the normal tensile strength of any other known cotton. So I'm like, oh, I want that. It was a values guided cultivation, and it happens to deliver tremendous consumer value in the form of a double strength. Sent it to a great mill located in Mexico that had unlocked a chemistry that allowed us to save about 70% of our water in the dye process. Then send it next door to Haiti, to a factory where we use waterless processing to eliminate about 90% of the water used in the conventional finishing, and where some of the proceeds of each garment goes into a fund that's not managed by the factory or by us, but is rather managed by in-country NGOs who then survey the workers who work in this factory and ask them what community development projects are important to you, and in this case it happens to be water. This small town of Wanaminthe, Haiti was about 11,000 people, when that factory opened and Levi's became engaged there and started improving the working conditions. Well, the working conditions are great. People wanted to work at that factory. That town of 11,000 burgeoned into a town of 38,000, and they didn't have sufficient water to begin with. So suddenly that one stream that goes through the village it's what water they use to cook with, to drink, to do laundry, to water their livestock, and it becomes the sewage drainage for the entire community as well. So one strained water resource was being further strained simply by the fact that the adjacent factory was fair and that was a good place to work. And so what we did is we then carved out a piece of production, a portion of every unit of production that goes through this factory goes to this fund that has now built a community water infrastructure and a large community kitchen, so that that's fully lit, so that no one's cooking in the dark. So that we through our industrial engagement, we can not only address the water from the field to the mill to the factory, but also in the community where the garment is made. And then finally, with smart instruction on twisting this very special long staple cotton, we ended up creating a garment that has vastly reduced capillary pull, and when you bring it out of the washing machine, it's already shed most of its water. It dries in air in about 20 minutes, where most jeans, take a couple of days. And so there's a water-saving story that has been carefully threaded throughout the entirety of the process. And that methodology becomes interesting and compelling because it was then demonstrated to be transferable from Dockers into Levi's. The look and feel of the brand is appropriate, but the methodology produces an output that is consistently better than conventional processes. And I know that's kind of in the weeds sort of stuff, and it's not necessarily the conventional purview of the fashion designer, so then I'm confronting this notion that perhaps I am cross-disciplinary in ways I hadn't thought. The next phase after the Aspen Institute, once I was able to sort of proof that sustainable design methodology was viable, and that business can be made to work for good as well as profit, it was a particularly resonant concept for the family that still owns Levi Strauss. And I was invited to join the Levi Strauss Foundation on the board of directors, and in doing so was able to sort of become more active in crafting philanthropic policy for one of the oldest corporate foundations in America. And it took what I thought the role of the fashion designer would be, and I really did think it was just runways and you know, champagne and air kissing and stuff, and it pushed me into a very different space, and also allowed me to activate the resources of the foundation in ways I hadn't expected. I thought I was giving up the opportunity to teach while coming on to work for Levi's, but in fact, after executing the Aspen Institute fellowship and publishing this design methodology for education, the opportunity came. I got invitations to teach both at CCA and at RISD, and took temporary or visiting faculty positions at both. Then there were the guest lecture opportunities, which were abundant. What was interesting is past these design schools that I show up here, the number of MBA programs that started asking for this content to be brought to bear. And then leveraging the foundation's resources, was able to participate in local philanthropies that mattered to me. The Queer Life Space in the Castro, and St. James Infirmary over in the Tenderloin, and then also developing young fashion designers at St. Louis Fashion Fund and here at the Fashion Incubator for San Francisco. And that was where my heart was. And right when I had sort of coalesced my work around my values, this little project showed up. And I hate wearable technology. Let me just say that. I think it seems like a perversion of purpose that technology as an activating tool, and when we think about wearable technology, the first thing I can think of is there's that, right? We all know what that is. And what was the first thing we did to that when we got this, right? We got rid of that. That a single object that has been imbued with a certain purpose and imposed on our body, the first thing we could do when we could transfer that purpose to some other object was we got rid of the first object, right? The watch was the first thing that went for many people, and it still exists for others as sort of as a style component. But more often than not, we check the time on our phone, and technology being what it is, and God bless them for it. The first thing, 5 years on, 10 years on. I would just take all the value of this screen that exists independent of the object itself. The ideal form of the smartphone here would be a phone absence presence. It would be like just the interface. And now we're going to shove all that interface back on our wrist, which I think is an interesting strategy. Wearables have often suffered this particular. When you have a technology and no place to put it, you invent an object to host it. And I love this image, and I hope I'm not razzing anyone in the room's product here. But look at the guy. He's got a big old smile on his face. Fun, active lifestyle. Pop of electric coral. A hoodie, and one half of a handcuff on the other. It seems like the meanest form a fitness tracker could possibly take. Now, there are other expressions of wearable technology that I also find somewhat dubious. We have an object with single function imposed, giving you advice that's really, this is what your friends are for, not take a deep breath. Oh. And so so here what we have is all these technological opportunities, and each one is manifesting as a form of an additional object in our life. And really, I think the ideal state that most of us would like is fewer objects. one of my mentors, Miss Adina Monsoon, once screamed, I don't want more things. No, I don't want more choices. I just want nicer things, right? It's one of my favorite episodes of Ab Fab, in fact. But it's a salient point, because where we go, the eventual extension of this proliferation of wearable opportunity is this scenario where each of these things might have been a really good idea when we first funded them on Kickstarter, but like it turns into more burden than anything, and the potential for wearables should be of an unburdening, a facilitation of an easier life. The other place where I feel uncomfortable is when wearables go after my cocktail rings, because that's sort of a sacred space for me, and if there's a particular purpose that's been assigned to that particularly chunky amethyst cocktail ring, and it's not the right night for amethyst, right? What do? Right? You can't possibly have all the varieties of cocktail ring sort of stuffed with all these varieties of digital functionality, and it's just not fair. It's my fingers. And then wearables often goes into a ridiculous space. And there's so much to be said about this particular image. She's wearing a brassiere that's been fitted with a series of haptic stimulators, and he has a device that's in control of the pattern of stimulation and the intensity of stimulation. And it's great that they cast a guy with no hair, because otherwise, given the intensity of the wind being blown, he would look ridiculous. I just think but the whole scenario, it's the objectification, it's sexist, this sort of it's this sexist masochism by extension, but it's, this is wearables. So we're caught in this dilemma of from the basic, right, to the absurd extreme. And when you have a new technological opportunity, what do you do with it if the sound solution isn't the crafting of a single object to host that technology? And that's where the role of brand becomes somewhat difficult. I represent, in this case, the black batwing up there, I represent a brand, and the brand is something. The brand is it has parameters. In this case, this is the brand. This is what Levi's is. Nowhere in here is there an obvious or easy place to put some technology. Do you guys see what I did there, by the way? It's from that one time I was a model. I like that. And so when I'm considering, in December of 2014, we got a call from Google saying, hey, we have this tremendous new wearable technology opportunity, woven tactile interface, the ability to weave into textile the same function as you have on the surface of your phone. Don't you guys think that's great? We said, no, I don't think that's great. Because this is what Levi's is. Levi's is blue. Levi's is washed. Levi's is heritage with a degree of authenticity. It is yes, it's for every man and woman, and kid, but it's also it's distinctly organic in its texture. And what they were describing to me was something that felt somewhat imposed and not purposeful. They didn't have a suggestion of purpose when they came to us, and they just what we are is a large apparel company about 45 minutes away. That didn't seem like a good reason to take on a project. But within the Levi's assortment, we do have something that is relevant. We have something called the Commuter Collection, and it's where a purposeful design is deployed in service of the life of the urban cyclist. How do you make cycling around the city better? It takes into considerations conditions on and off the bike, trying to make for an easier, better ride through water repellency, breathability, just enough stretch. We've got smart design in the form of reflectors. The tab on your trucker jacket opens up and becomes a reflector, or a little holster for your bike lock on the back, so you don't have to awkwardly stick it in your trousers. So and little reflectors on the cuff. It was about smart solutions to make the ride better. And when we consider the opportunity of woven tactile interface integrated into garments in that context, the harm is on the right. This is we see this all the time. People on their bike, like getting directions, screwing around with their texts or Insta-ing, and it was on the ride back from Mountain View after I said, no, this isn't a really good idea, that I was looking at the steering wheel of my car and saying, oh, this design solution has already been presented. There are certain functions that are taken off the dash and off of the console and put right in the steering wheel. I can answer my phone, I can track forward, track back. And all of that was to enable a safer drive. It seemed that a similar thinking could be deployed in service of a safer ride, a more present, sustained awareness on the bicycle. And so that's what we've been working towards. And so I'll try to use technology to show you a video. if give it a moment. Technology. It's loading. It's taking. It's loading. That's what I'm showing you.
Well, you might be on a.
Oh, you don't want to. You don't want to do that. Okay.
You're on the slow network. Is that the right password? Okay.
Now this one's gonna get real slow too. So that gives you a no, not you. Not you at all. Okay. Slick, huh? Oops. Oh shit. We'll just go through that real quick then, won't we? So this notion that technology independent of purpose wasn't something of interest, but and really wasn't worth taking on a challenge like the one we were about to confront, which is how to make woven tactile interface washable. What we found is as soon as we've been able to find the actual purpose, which is to create a safer ride by removing the screen, taking the screen out of the face, putting it in the pocket, and allowing people to sustain eye contact or contact with the road or maintain a degree of presence in life, that this was actually going to make for a safer urban cyclist. That it went from being something that we didn't really want to do to really something that we had to do. There was an urgency about the proposition as soon as we understood that the purpose was ours, and it really stretched what my understanding of the role of the designer needed to be. It says that beyond designing the object, beyond designing the consumer experience, you have to design. I'll show you a few examples here of what you have to design that I had never comfortably taken on. Skipping ahead, transitions are slow. So first, let me show you that it is real. It does work. It's not just a boondoggle in a video. Turn-by-turn directions off. Okay. Modified Google Maps specifically for urban cyclists, being able to turn off that annoying shouting at you every direction as you're about to approach it. I just need the next direction, and it's a simple.
Go northeast for 500 feet and turn left.
Or it knows where you're going, and sometimes all you need to know is how long it's going to take you to get there.
Your ETA is 41 minutes. You should arrive by 2:35 p.m.
And sometimes that's all you need. You don't need it shouting everything at you. And it was sometimes you realize some of the format of the applications that we like to use are explicitly developed for use in the in the car. And it was a willingness on Google's part to take those apps, for example, this one, and reconfigure Google Map for the cyclist. And now prefers and goes to cyclist mode immediately. It also will do that as soon as you start riding your bike. It recognizes telemetry, velocity, and inertia, and will respond to your behaviors and activate those systems that are programmed. Once you've come to a halt, it knows to let you see all of those text push notifications that it had been blocking from you when you're on your ride. But it also knows when you're on your ride that there are 5 people you need to talk to, your boss maybe not being one of them, but your mom calls. It will send that one through, and you can assign a color to her identity, and it will vibrate. You get a little pulse in your sleeve. You know to look. You see the color that's been assigned to that very short white list of people that you want to talk to, and you can pick up, or you can swipe and send a text that says, "Hey, I'm on my bike. I'll call you when I'm safe." So these sorts of capabilities that seemed useful and were worth the challenge, but the challenge is kind of big. This little space right here, it has been activated with the same function as the surface of the phone, but the truth of the matter is, when we think about a garment, we think about the image on the right. What we have now is a very complex system, like the image on the left, and that has to get thrown in a washing machine. That this very discrete, hidden technology has to be sufficiently robust to hold up to all the expectations of a normal Levi's trucker jacket, and that we as designers had to make that decision. We know we have to protect, but do we protect and hide, or do we protect and present? There were many merchants at Levi's when we first got a hold of this proposition that really wanted blinkers, like turn signals on the back of the jacket, and which I think is something I've never seen an urban cyclist actually do indicate their turn direction. Why they would want to light themselves up to do that, it was absurd. It seemed that the designer in this case is the one that would intuitively know what the best form for this technology would take. But the considerations of that form were in a design vocabulary wholly outside of our normal professional purview. Like the strap right there, yeah, it's the right place to put a strap, and we knew that we wanted the vocabulary of engagement to be a snap, a simple snap like you would snap a normal jacket. But the next step is how the hell do I design that form correctly? And these are some of the iterations that we've taken in trying to align on the perfect form of this object. Similarly, this is an image of these are the wash tests on the cuff. The first iterations of this technology, when we put them in an industrial washer or a home laundry even, they were failing after two or three cycles. And the failure, looks like this. This is not the normal failure that I, as a designer, would normally take on. This is a electron scanning microscope cross-section of a broken silver beryllium alloy wire that is somewhere in here. These are not the conversations that are naturally comfortable, but they're the appropriate conversations to effectively activate the technology. And so this, I'm going to skip this video because that was too hard. So what I'm describing is a system where a person like myself who really had predicated their value on mastery of a particular disciplinary alignment has had to extend their understanding of that discipline to include industrial design, to include user experience and application design, and to include modifications of existing cloud-based platforms and bringing them down and making them work with a jacket, which means challenging myself to understand what the distinctions are between a gesture API and a garment configuration API, and how to design a garment that appropriately interacts with these full complete systems, so that what we end up at the end of the day is still a piece of clothing not inconsistent from anything else in the closet that has simply been invested with additional value. Whereas those earlier iterations of technology that I was showing were one function into one new object, and trying to impose that and find the right place to plug it into your life. We already know that this is the most successful outerwear design in history. I mean, it's quantitative. We've been making this design for about 50 years, and people are still buying it. We know that there's traction here. So why not take that object that is already the much-loved object and invest it with the new values and the technology can bring, rather than trying to another handcuff, right? So that was, I thought, was a very sort of satisfying portfolio of activity. And when I talk about my affection for the Bay Area and what it means to have moved out here, when I think about my career and what I've done so far. And I think probably the best thing I've done to date, and it's still a work in progress, is this one. Last summer, when the current ownership of the Stud is a now almost 52-year-old drag bar, one of the oldest drag bars in the city, right? A much-loved cultural hub and place to drink a lot. And it's been the home for the weird cast-offs and castaways like myself. One of the first bars that I went to when I got to the city was the Stud. And that's a consistent story with a lot of people who've moved here. But I don't know if you've seen this lately. It's surrounded by this new crop of glassy condos that tower over it now. They're kind of bullying it a little bit, and I don't stand for bullying. A new owner of the property and the land came to the table and had tripled rent overnight with the intention of forcing this poor little institution out. And we've been seeing this trend so much, and we all participate in it as sort of tangential spectators. Because we can really blame tech, right? And we're not part of tech, right? But we do enjoy a burgeoning and prosperous local cultural life and economy, but this is the unintentional exercise of social eminent domain. Normally, a government declares blight and says that's now going to be ours. Well, in this case, prosperity is the blight, and we have to fight back against that somehow. And so a group of us banded together and said, this must stop. And we've sort of branded the activity, we're going to call it resistance economics. I look back at my history and I think of myself as a fashion designer, but when I really look at what I've done, I've taken large institutions and large companies and managed to, without their knowledge, retrain some of their behaviors to try to create social value and try to create environmental value. And to work within the system, to create change in the system, seems to be something that both I can do and I need to do. And I took the little black bat wing off of this one because screw it. The most important thing that happened on January 19th for me isn't that asshole got elected, but it is that 18 queerdos who bought a bar as a cooperative or collective managed to cut their first paychecks on the 19th of January, managed to pay themselves a salary on the 19th of January, and did it without a boss, and did it without taking out huge loans, and did it with a big fuck you to the people who are trying to force them out. And so when I think of the important work that I do, or if I have a particular disciplinary purpose, I am a resistance economist. And I guess that concludes my long-winded presentation.